Somewhere deep in the mountains of western Mexico, a man sits alone. No cameras, no bodyguards close enough to see his face, no phone, no social media, no interviews, no known address, no confirmed photograph taken in over a decade. The U.S. government has put a $15 million bounty on his head, 3 times more than they ever offered for El Chapo. And yet, nobody can find him. His name, the one the world knows, is El Mencho. And what he has built is not a drug cartel. It is something the world has never seen before. A private military, a shadow government, a criminal empire so vast, so violent, and so perfectly organized that U.S. intelligence agencies have compared it to ISIS. But here is the most chilling part of this story. This man, the most wanted criminal alive, was once just a broke kid farming avocados in rural Mexico. He was arrested multiple times, deported, imprisoned, laughed at. So how does a man who couldn't even finish elementary school end up building a cartel that operates on 6 continents, floods all 50 U.S. states with drugs, and makes the Mexican government tremble? That is what we are going to find out today. Somewhere deep in the mountains of western Mexico, a man sits alone. No cameras, no bodyguards close enough to see his face, no phone, no social media, no interviews, no known address, no confirmed photograph taken in over a decade. The U.S. government has put a $15 million bounty on his head, 3 times more than they ever offered for El Chapo. And yet, nobody can find him. His name, the one the world knows, is El Mencho. And what he has built is not a drug cartel. It is something the world has never seen before. A private military, a shadow government, a criminal empire so vast, so violent, and so perfectly organized that U.S. intelligence agencies have compared it to ISIS. But here is the most chilling part of this story. This man, the most wanted criminal alive, was once just a broke kid farming avocados in rural Mexico. He was arrested multiple times, deported, imprisoned, laughed at. So how does a man who couldn't even finish elementary school end up building a cartel that operates on 6 continents, floods all 50 U.S. states with drugs, and makes the Mexican government tremble? That is what we are going to find out today. When a young man from rural Mexico has no money and no future, and he is smart enough to know it, he does what millions have done before him. He moves. Ruben crosses the border into the United States illegally. He leaves behind his family, his village, his real name. In California, he begins using different identities, different aliases. He is trying on new skins, searching for the one that fits. What he finds in America is a world that does not want him, not legally anyway. But the underground economy, the criminal economy, that world is wide open. He starts small, petty crime, street-level drug distribution, the kind of work that pays just enough to keep you hungry for more. In 1986, San Francisco police arrest him. The charges? Theft and possession of a loaded firearm. It is his first documented arrest in America. He is released. He does not stop. Over the following years, he becomes a courier for drug traffickers, moving product back and forth across the Mexico-U.S. border. Each trip teaches him something: how customs officers think, which routes are watched, which officials can be paid, which ones cannot. He is not just smuggling drugs, he is studying a system. He is learning how the game is played from the inside. In 1989, San Francisco police catch him again, this time selling drugs. He is held for months before being deported back to Mexico. But he comes right back. Some men learn from getting caught. They become more careful, more patient, more strategic. Ruben Oseguera is that kind of man. By the early 1990s, Ruben is operating with his older brother, Abraham. Together, they are doing heroin deals in San Francisco. And then comes the moment that reveals exactly who this man is. 1992, a bar in San Francisco. A heroin deal is going down. Abraham is handling the transaction. Ruben is there to watch, to protect, to keep things clean. The deal is completed. Money changes hands. On the way out, Ruben examines the stack of bills the buyer gave them. He looks at the way the notes are arranged, perfectly organized, methodically stacked, eerily clean. He turns to his brother and says, "Those were undercover cops." He was absolutely right. But the warning comes too late. 3 weeks later, both brothers are arrested. Inside the courtroom, something happens that shows another dimension of Ruben's character. He refuses to confess. He denies everything. He fights. Then the prosecutor delivers an ultimatum. If Ruben does not plead guilty, Abraham will face life in prison. Ruben goes silent. He looks at his brother, and he confesses. He takes the fall to save his family. He is sentenced to 5 years in the Big Spring Correctional Center in West Texas. Most people would collapse in a place like that, lose hope, count the days. Ruben Oseguera did something else entirely. He used the time. Inside that prison, he met young men from across Mexico and the United States, men with different criminal connections, different knowledge, different networks. He listened. He built relationships. He recruited, without anyone realizing that is what he was doing. By the time he walked out on parole in 1997, he did not leave prison broken. He left with a plan. What happened next stunned everyone who knew him. Ruben Oseguera, 3-time arrestee, convicted drug smuggler, freshly deported from American prison, went home to Mexico and became a police officer. He joined the Jalisco State Police. He was posted to multiple municipalities. He wore the uniform. He carried the badge. People who knew him were confused. Was this rehabilitation? A new chapter? No. It was the most calculated move of his criminal career. Think about what a police uniform gives you access to. Training files, surveillance methods, informant networks, patrol schedules, arrest protocols, counterintelligence procedures. The exact playbooks law enforcement uses to catch people like him. He was not joining the police to serve the public. He was joining to study his enemy. He wanted to know, how does law enforcement think? How do they track targets? What mistakes do criminals make that get them caught? How do you disappear when they come for you? He absorbed everything, and when he had learned what he needed, he walked away from the badge without looking back. The knowledge he took with him would, in the years to come, make him nearly impossible to catch. He was no longer Ruben. He had become El Mencho. And El Mencho had a vision. Before El Mencho could build his own empire, he needed to learn the trade from someone who had already built one. He joined the Mencho Cartel, a criminal organization operating in Jalisco and Colima, run by a man named Armando Valencia Cornelio. His first job? Hitman, bodyguard. On the surface, it was low-level work, but El Mencho understood what others did not. Every position is a classroom, if you are paying attention. And he paid very close attention. He also made a strategic marriage. He wed Rosalinda González Valencia, whose family had deep roots and influence inside the Mencho Cartel. The marriage was not just romantic, it was political. His access inside the organization immediately expanded. Then came an unexpected turning point. In 2003, Mexican authorities arrested Valencia Cornelio. With the boss gone, the cartel began to wobble. Rival organization Los Zetas smelled weakness and moved in aggressively. To survive, the Mencho Cartel had no choice. It folded itself into a larger organization, the Sinaloa Cartel, under a division run by a man named Nacho Coronel, the uncle of El Chapo's wife. El Mencho was now working, in a very indirect sense, for the most powerful drug lord in the world, El Chapo. He was assigned as a bodyguard to Nacho Coronel, a glorified security detail. El Chapo barely knew his name. Nobody in Sinaloa took him seriously. That was a mistake they would spend years paying for. For several years, the arrangement held. El Mencho built his network quietly, expanded his influence carefully, and waited. Then, in 2010, everything shifted. First, the top commander of the Mencho Cartel, Oscar Nava Valencia, was arrested. Then, just months later, Nacho Coronel himself was killed in an army raid. In a single year, the two most powerful men above El Mencho were gone. The power vacuum was enormous, and into that vacuum, El Mencho moved immediately. The Mencho Cartel split in two. One faction called itself Los Torsos. The other called itself La Resistencia. El Mencho led Los Torsos. What followed was a war for Jalisco, and El Mencho fought it with a brutality that shocked even Mexico's most hardened observers. The streets of Jalisco ran red. Murder rates doubled almost overnight. His enemies were not just killed, they were made into examples. Bodies left in public. Messages delivered not in words, but in corpses. His rivals had two choices: flee or die. Most fled. Within a short time, El Mencho controlled Jalisco's drug trade entirely. And with that control, he made an announcement. Not in words, but in the name he chose for his new organization. Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación. CJNG. The New Generation. Mexico would never be the same. Most cartels grow through territory. El Mencho grew through transformation. He did not just want to run a drug operation. He wanted to build an institution, one that would outlast him, outfight any opponent, and operate with military precision. He studied other cartels, especially Los Zetas, Mexico's most feared paramilitary criminal organization. He took their tactics, their structure, their intimidation methods, and improved on all of them. He outfitted his fighters in military-style uniforms. He gave them armored vehicles, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, .50 caliber sniper rifles, and machine guns that outgunned most Mexican police departments. He also used social media in a way no cartel had done before. His people posted videos online, not to brag, but to recruit and to terrify. Videos of beheadings. Videos of fighters waving weapons from military-style convoys. Videos that sent one clear message. We are not criminals. We are an army. Recruitment ran on 2 tracks simultaneously. Track 1, fear. Young men in cartel territory were given a choice that wasn't really a choice. Join or face consequences. Track 2, desperation. For young men with no jobs, no money, no future, CJNG offered food, housing, a wage, and a sense of belonging. The classic Robin Hood recruitment model used to build a force that would serve anything but justice. Within a few years, El Mencho commanded an army of over 5,000 fighters, and he built the infrastructure to supply them. More than 100 methamphetamine laboratories hidden deep in jungle terrain, staffed under force, guarded around the clock. The factories ran 24 hours a day. The money poured in, and El Mencho spent a significant portion of it on better weapons. In 2011, El Mencho sent a message to all of Mexico. In Veracruz, a city that Los Zetas considered their territory, 2 pickup trucks pulled up at a busy intersection on September 21st. Workers unloaded 35 bodies onto the road in broad daylight. A handwritten note claimed all of them were Zetas members, enemies of CJNG. The entire city froze. The message was not subtle. CJNG had arrived in Veracruz, and they intended to take it. El Mencho's expansion strategy followed a brutal but consistent logic. Identify the territory you want, destroy whoever holds it, fill the vacuum with your own people. He targeted Los Zetas, Los Caballeros Templarios, and a string of smaller organizations across central and western Mexico. One by one, he dismantled them, taking their roots, their labs, their revenue streams. Each victory made CJNG wealthier. Each battle made El Mencho's fighters more experienced. Each dead rival sent more young men running to join the winning side. He was not fighting wars. He was giving job interviews with bullets. By the mid-2000s, CJNG's reach extended from Jalisco to Colima, from Guanajuato to Chihuahua. The cartel controlled drug trafficking across most of western Mexico and was aggressively pushing into territories still held by Sinaloa. The man El Chapo's associates, once dismissed as a low-level bodyguard, was now the most aggressive criminal force in the country. Mexican law enforcement had been watching CJNG's rise with growing alarm. But watching and stopping are very different things. Police operations against CJNG repeatedly failed, not because the officers lacked courage, but because El Mencho had a critical advantage. He always knew they were coming. He had spent years building a network of informants inside government institutions, police stations, military bases, intelligence agencies. When authorities planned a raid on a CJNG location, word reached El Mencho's people first. By the time officers arrived, El Mencho was gone. His escape system was equally sophisticated. Whenever police moved toward his position, CJNG fighters on the ground would immediately establish roadblocks across the city. Vehicles were set on fire. Fuel stations were torched. The goal was simple: chaos. Create enough disorder to give El Mencho time to vanish into the mountains. In April of 2015, the confrontation between CJNG and the Mexican state reached a level that no one had seen before. In Jalisco, a CJNG convoy ambushed a police convoy. 15 officers were killed, 5 more seriously wounded. It was one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in Mexican history. The government's response was swift. The military was deployed. Operation Jalisco was launched. Helicopters swept the jungle. Then one of those helicopters was shot down with a rocket-propelled grenade. 6 soldiers died. In the same week, CJNG fighters set 5 fuel stations and 36 vehicles on fire across the state. The message was unmistakable. CJNG was not just a drug cartel. It was a force that could fight the Mexican military and make them bleed. The government's hands were shaking. For years, El Mencho and El Chapo had maintained an uneasy coexistence. They had carved Mexico between them, Sinaloa cartel in the northwest, CJNG expanding rapidly in the west and center. In 2015, after months of deadly clashes, the two men reached a deal. Boundaries were agreed, routes were divided. A fragile truce was declared. Then in January 2016, El Chapo was arrested for the third and final time. He was extradited to the United States, tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. The most famous drug lord in the world was gone. El Mencho did not mourn. He moved. The truce was over before the handcuffs were fully on El Chapo's wrists. CJNG immediately began pushing into Sinaloa territory, the smuggling corridors in Tijuana, the crossing points at Ciudad Juarez, the mountains of El Chapo's home state of Sinaloa itself. In Colima, the violence exploded. Murder rates more than tripled within months as CJNG and Sinaloa loyalists fought for control. And then El Mencho did something audacious, almost theatrical in its cruelty. In August 2016, he had El Chapo's 2 sons kidnapped from a restaurant in Jalisco, where they were celebrating a birthday with friends. The message was personal. This is my territory now. Your father cannot protect you from here. The Sinaloa cartel scrambled. They paid $2 million and an enormous quantity of drugs to secure the release of El Chapo's sons. El Mencho accepted the ransom and released them. But the message had already been delivered. The old order was dead. There was a new king. By the end of the 2000s, CJNG had transformed from a regional cartel into a genuinely global organization. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration confirmed CJNG presence in all 50 American states, coast to coast, north to south. Not just as a supplier, but as an organization with local distribution networks embedded in American cities. According to DEA estimates, CJNG was responsible for roughly 1/3 of all drugs entering the United States, a staggering market share built in less than a decade. Every month, the cartel shipped approximately 5 metric tons of cocaine and 5 metric tons of methamphetamine across the border. The annual value of cocaine flowing through CJNG's U.S. networks? An estimated $88 billion. Crystal meth revenue? Around $4.6 billion per year. CJNG was not just a drug cartel anymore. It had become a multi-industry criminal enterprise. Oil theft, tapping Mexican petroleum pipelines and selling the product on black markets. Human trafficking, moving migrants across borders for enormous fees. Extortion, collecting monthly payments from business owners across CJNG territory. Arms trafficking, money laundering through legitimate businesses. The cartel operated active networks on 6 of the world's 7 continents. The Mexican government estimated CJNG's total assets at $50 billion. El Mencho's personal net worth? Approximately $1 billion. The boy who could not afford to finish 5th grade had become, by some measures, one of the wealthiest criminals in human history. Success in the criminal world is measured in 2 currencies, money and survival. El Mencho had both, in quantities that defied all logic. While authorities dismantled pieces of his organization, arrested his associates, and seized his assets, El Mencho himself remained free, invisible, untouchable. The walls were closing in on everyone around him. His son, Rubén Oseguera González, was arrested by Mexican authorities and extradited to the United States. His 2 brothers, Antonio and Abraham, were imprisoned. His brother-in-law, Abigail Valencia, was captured. His own wife, Rosalinda González Valencia, was arrested. His inner circle was being systematically dismantled, and yet El Mencho remained free. In 2020, CJNG demonstrated that it could strike anywhere, even in Mexico City's most secure and prestigious neighborhoods. When gunmen ambushed the city's police chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch, on Paseo de la Reforma Boulevard. His bulletproof SUV absorbed over 400 rounds. 3 bullets found their way through. Garcia Harfuch survived. 2 of his bodyguards and a civilian bystander did not. From his hospital bed, Garcia Harfuch named El Mencho as the architect of the attack. The same month, a federal judge in Colima who had ruled against CJNG interests was murdered along with his wife. Weeks later, Jalisco's former governor was assassinated. El Mencho also sent death threats to Mexico's president, its Secretary of Foreign Relations, the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and the Secretary of Security and Citizen Protection. He was not hiding from the state. He was educating it. The question that law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border ask every single day is the same one. How has he not been caught? The answer lies in everything El Mencho is not. He is not like Pablo Escobar, who craved public adoration, gave interviews, and entered politics, all of which made him trackable. He is not like El Chapo, who built a public persona, communicated through intermediaries in ways that could be intercepted, and ultimately trusted the wrong people. El Mencho is the opposite of both. He does not give interviews. He does not appear in photographs. The Mexican government possesses only 3 or 4 images of him, all taken more than 15 years ago. Law enforcement cannot confirm what he looks like today. He avoids cities entirely. He lives in the mountain ranges of Jalisco, Michoacán, and Colima. Dense, difficult terrain that helicopters struggle to penetrate, and ground forces cannot reach quickly. He moves constantly, never sleeping in the same location for long. Even senior CJNG commanders rarely see him in person. Communication happens through layers of intermediaries, each knowing only one step of the chain. He has informants at every level of government. When operations are planned against him, he knows before the officers leave the building. And perhaps most disorienting of all for authorities, El Mencho does not drink alcohol. He does not use drugs. He does not hold lavish parties or surround himself with visible luxury. In a criminal world defined by excess and ego, he is invisible by choice. Discipline is his greatest weapon. In 2022, rumors circulated, and were briefly reported, that he had died of illness in a hospital in Guadalajara. American intelligence dismissed it immediately. They had seen this kind of story before. It was either deliberate misinformation, planted to reduce pressure on his organization, or simply unverified rumor. As of the latest available intelligence, El Mencho is considered alive and operational. The bounty on his head was raised to $10 million in 2018, then raised again to $15 million in December 2024. Still, no one has come forward. No one has turned him in. Either nobody knows where he is, or those who do are too afraid to speak. Both possibilities are terrifying. Numbers can tell part of the story, but they cannot capture the weight of what El Mencho and CJNG have left behind. Mexico is now the most deadly country in the world, not at war. Much of that violence traces directly to the territorial wars CJNG has waged since 2011. In some states, murder rates have tripled. In others, entire towns have been evacuated, not by natural disasters, but by cartel violence. Families have fled their homes. Farms have been abandoned. Journalists who report on CJNG are killed. The fentanyl crisis devastating communities across the United States, the synthetic opioid that is now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45, flows primarily through Mexican cartel networks. CJNG is a central player in that supply chain. Every statistic about fentanyl overdose deaths has a supply chain behind it. And somewhere in that supply chain, El Mencho's organization plays a role. In Mexico, CJNG has established a presence in 31 of 32 states. Not just drug trafficking, but governance. In areas where the government cannot or will not operate, CJNG fills the space. It provides, and it controls. That is something no cartel has ever done at this scale before. And it is the thing that frightens analysts most. Because cartels that only traffic drugs can be disrupted. Cartels that have replaced the state cannot. Here is the truth that makes El Mencho's story so difficult to process. He should not have been possible. He had every disadvantage. Born poor, no education, arrested repeatedly, deported, imprisoned. And yet he outmaneuvered governments, militaries, intelligence agencies, and rival criminal organizations. He studied the police from inside. He learned from every criminal he ever met, in prison and in the field. He took the best tactics from every cartel he encountered and discarded the weaknesses. He understood that the men who came before him, Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, fell because of ego, and he deliberately stripped ego from his operation. No fame, no face, no trace, just power. There is a dark and uncomfortable lesson in El Mencho's rise. A system that produces desperate poverty, corrupt institutions, and failed governance does not just create drug users, it creates drug lords. Every failed policy, every corrupt official, every child who cannot afford school, every avocado farmer paid almost nothing for back-breaking labor. Each of these is a brick in the foundation of what El Mencho built. He did not rise despite the system. He rose because of it. And until the conditions that produce men like El Mencho are addressed, the poverty, the corruption, the institutional failure on both sides of the border, the cartel that bears his name will outlast him, whoever eventually fills his seat. Because CJNG is not just a cartel anymore. It is an institution. And institutions do not die when their founders disappear. El Mencho is still out there. Somewhere in the mountains of western Mexico, the most wanted criminal in the world is watching the world search for him. $15 million. Decades of manhunts. The combined resources of 2 governments. And still, silence. The story of El Mencho is not over. It is still being written in blood across 2 continents. If you want to understand the world's most dangerous criminal organizations, their origins, their power, and what they reveal about the broken systems that produce them, subscribe to this channel. We cover the stories that go deeper than headlines. The next video is already waiting for you.